Hi, everybody. Today is Thursday, February 6th, 2025, and our friend Michael Hudson and Richard Wolff are back with us. Welcome back.
Thank you very much, Nima. Glad to be here.
Let's get started with the shocking plan of Donald Trump and his solution for the conflict in the Middle East. Here is what he said.
I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent. But more importantly than that is the people that have been absolutely destroyed that live there now can live in peace in a much better situation because they're living in hell. And those people will now be able to live in peace. We'll make sure that it's done world class. It'll be wonderful for the people. Palestinians mostly we're talking about. And I have a feeling that despite them saying no, I have a feeling that the king in Jordan and that the general president, but that the general in Egypt will open their hearts and will give us the kind of land that we need to get this done. And people can live in harmony and in peace.
Richard, go ahead. How did you find it?
Well, as you could see among the reporters listening a few feet away from the president, with the incredulity visible on their faces, I must say, and I respect Mr. Trump for this, that if you had asked me what he might come up with as the solution in the Middle East, this would never have dawned on me. He's way ahead of me in thinking of alternatives. So let me start with a few. He refers to the poor people of Gaza living in hell. Shall we remind him that the hell they're living in is the result of the weapons that the United States paid for and provided to Israel to do that? He's positioning himself as the helper and carefully avoiding any mention that he's the cause of the hell that he now proposes to free them from. Number two, the Palestinian people living in Gaza have chosen to remain there even though their children were being killed in record numbers, their houses destroyed on a scale that even Mr. Trump refers to as hell. Is it reasonable to imagine that if Mr. Trump tells them to go, that they're going to do what the bombs of Israel and the United States didn't get them to do? I don't think so. Number three, Jordan, Egypt, and virtually every other country in that part of the world has been repeatedly approached to take in more Palestinians. They cannot, they have said over and over again. Palestinians are a major part of Jordan as a country already based on many years of this movement. The people who are now in what was Palestine are the people who want to stay there, who did not leave, etc., etc. It is extraordinary. The reference to the Riviera, that's a comment that verges close to a hideous immorality. I mean, in the midst of the destruction, this real estate dealer is figuring out how he could build condos on the beach. I'm sure once he's cleaned up all the blood that's on that beach and made sure that it is dyed so it doesn't offend the beachgoers whose money he hopes to collect. I could go on, but this is wild. He's going to evacuate. It sounds like he wants to evacuate the Palestinians against their will, which means force, which means he's either going to use Israeli troops who will therefore never leave that part of the world. How could they? Or he will introduce American troops. The man who ran on ending the endless wars has already bombed Somalia. He did that in his first 10 days. And now we have a proposal that would involve much more American military intervention. And let me assure you, these Palestinians who have fought against horrific odds and horrific destruction to stay in their country are not quietly going to go neither to Jordan nor Egypt nor anywhere else. There's going to have to be a continuous military occupation. And even that will be challenged all the time. That will require more US or Israeli military. This is a recipe for endless conflict and trouble, which it's supposed to do away with. It guarantees it. And then the nearly moronic grin on the face of Mr. Netanyahu, sitting a few feet away from him in many of the clips, smiling because, much of Israeli strategy has been to draw the United States in to help Israel deal with its problems, not just its problems with the Palestinians, but even more its problems with Iran. They want the United States involved because by themselves, they can't do it. Just like they couldn't have done what they did in Gaza without the United States. So they've wanted the United States to get more involved. The United States has hesitated. Mr. Biden irritated Mr. Netanyahu by limiting the support, which was already large, money, weapons, and all of that, but wouldn't do more. Mr. Trump didn't even have to be asked. He's volunteering more. What logic is there? The United States really needs to be drawn into endless conflicts in the Middle East more than it already is? Well, the answer seems to be yes. Maybe the attraction of what Mr. Trump called in the clip you just showed us, the Mediterranean Riviera, is so attractive, those profits, that all the rest, the cost in money, in blood, in endless, is worth it. It's just a calculation. Who has to pay the costs versus who will collect the profits? This is, if I dare say so, I don't want to be appearing to be beating the dead horse, but when empires decline, their leaders revert more and more to fantastical calculations, desperate gestures, hopeless. At least it will be retroactive. 20 years from now, this will be seen for the hopeless, desperate gesture that it is. Just like the war in Ukraine will be viewed that way, and many other items. So that's my first reaction.
Well, Richard, you confessed at the very beginning to not having foreseen and forecast this.
Yes.
The fact is that I didn't either, and none of us could have. And that's because, as we've discussed before, we take the materialist approach to history. And both of when we forecast things, we think, well, what would be in the economic interest of each of the parties there? But when you're dealing with a leader who doesn't recognize or think in terms of real national interest, but just sort of exploding, it's very hard to forecast what a leader of a country will do when he doesn't know what he's doing. It all becomes a kind of impressionistic soup. And I think that's what's really been happening here. the best thing that I can do is think of, okay, let's suppose we're in Donald Trump's mind. What we've got to make some forecast. We can't just say nobody could have foreseen it and what it is. So let's follow the logic of it. I think Trump sees Gaza in the same way he sees Canada or Greenland, as something like the 51st state is what he's talked. But I think that, of course, Gaza is different. I can imagine him thinking of doing to Gaza what the State Department would like to do to Russia and China. Divide Gaza into 4 parts and take it as 4 states. 51st to the 51st. That will give, it'll be part of Israel. That will give Israel 8 senators. That's, I think, a logical thought that Trump may come up with. Probably on the spur of the moment, but he's probably has his people watching this show now, and they'll put it under discussion, and somehow this idea is going to percolate under his brain. But I think when it comes to his brain, what's left unsaid and unexplained gives you a key to the problems going to come up. Who is going to pay for building all of these wonderful beachfront properties, which is going to cost billions of dollars, and who's going to get the money from selling or leasing these properties, and who will be getting the tax revenues, the property tax revenues from these properties? If you begin to think how this will work out in practice, is this going to be a USAID project? Of course, let's aid, rebuild Gaza, build it up. America will pay for it. We will give it to Israel to manage, and Israel will be getting the proceeds and doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That will, the self-interest of Donald Trump is in the same as the Democrats, getting campaign contributions. You have political interest replacing national interest. So I think when we're forecasting what's going to happen here, we put national interests aside and just we really narrow and have a tunnel vision in the kind of someone who's really just sort of a schemer and thinks of, well, maybe I can do this, maybe I can do that, or who's just throwing out ideas and saying, let's see what the response to these ideas are. It's as if when Trump gives talks about whether it's Gaza or whether it's tariffs or other actions, he really wants to see what's the response and what does that response tell me of the pressure points that I can use on other countries and on my own campaign contributors to get more support. And somehow the fact of linking any rebuilding of Gaza with AID sort of explains a lot of how Trump's administration is quite rightly trying to close down AID and many of its other things as part of the fight against the State Department. And all of a sudden, we're looking at a whole kind of jumble of political control, manipulation, and just domestic U.S. political maneuvering that is disconnected from the usual geopolitical considerations that we're used to talking about.
The way, if I could build on that, I think it's very interesting that Michael uses the phrase, the political interest displaces or replaces the national interest. In my judgment, from watching it over the years, and from my own personal experiences in Africa, where I spent some time, USAID was always, from the beginning, understood to be an instrument of U.S. foreign policy, sometimes referred to as soft power. In other words, you seek your objectives, same objectives, But you do it by giving people food when they're hungry, by endowing a college or helping a university get going, something like that. And you hype the humanitarian dimension and you kind of hide the foreign policy dimension. Sometimes the hiding gets exposed. Sometimes it goes so far as to be a program of regime change. But only the gullible American public, which could not be shown these things, believed the humanitarian story was the only story to tell. Many people, including many who worked for AID, knew very well that there were these two dimensions and that, number one. So I don't hear from Mr. Trump the likelihood that any of that is going to change. He's going to do soft power and he's going to do hard power, and the AID will be its particular mixture of that. I don't think this is a serious issue, number one. More serious is his desire to purge across the government everybody who's his political enemy. Not whether they've done the national interest a disservice. First of all, he wouldn't find it out in most cases. And number two, that's not the problem for him. The problem for him is they don't see all of this the same way he does, and he can't assume their loyalty, which is true, he can't. So he's going to replace them with people whose loyalty he can control. Let me say that again then. When empires decline, they divide and eat each other up. That's what they do. Look at it this way. Whatever Mr. Trump is doing that exceeds past practice will now be copied by the Democrats. They will do, after the next election, to him what he's doing to them. Especially because if you ask the leading Republicans, they are doing, in their minds, to the Democrats what the Democrats did to him. Put him through all those legal hoops, charge him with things, make him out to be a big criminal and all the rest of it. And who was doing it? People who, in general, do the same things as he does, but just get away with it more because it's been the accepted behavior. I mean, Mr. Clinton did everything as grubby sexually as Mr. Trump, right? But he didn't end up in front of a jury. I mean, I understand there are specific differences, but you can understand the Republicans are saying every day they're just doing to the Democrats what was done to them. And there's a good bit of truth to that. I don't see any reason why I should make believe otherwise. I know the Democrats are capable of it all. Look what they did to Bernie Sanders. Not all that different. Right? It's not all that different. Mr. Trump first, savaged the Republican establishment, and then he went on to savage the Democrats. The Democrats savaged Bernie. Is there any reason to believe they're not going to savage Mr. Trump? They already tried. After his first term, they're going to try again, and they may succeed. But if we can be materialist a la Michael, then I don't see here a fundamental difference at all. Democrats might not say 51st state to Canada, because just between you and me, the bravado there, which will appeal to Americans, will make the Canadians crazy. And in the long run, that's probably not a good idea. And Greenland, really? You're gonna what? Forcibly take property away from a fellow NATO member? That's an interesting move. Why? You already use Greenland as a base for the American military. They already have bases. They've had them there for many years. Greenland has said, we will give you more bases. If you know anything about Greenland, it is an enormous geography and virtually no people. I live in an apartment complex here in Manhattan. We have more residents of this complex than there are citizens of Greenland. I believe their population is 58,000 people. We have 60,000 here. So we beat them. And we're just a little corner neighborhood of the city of New York. Just like the population of New York is larger than the population of Jews in Israel. So let's keep our perspective. This is theater. This is performance. This is all of that crap. If Mr. Trump wants to build hotels in Greenland, the chances are that with his money, even without the presidency, he can persuade enough Greenlanders to sell him coastal property and build his damn hotels and his golf courses. Come on, this is not serious here. He is showing how powerful he is. It's all being done in a big rush. You know, he's taken the canal from Panama. There's nobody in Panama either. It's like Greenland. It's just, this is all performance. And he's the naughty boy, the mold breaker, and these are the images that got him to the presidency. He's just continuing. It's what works for him. Why should you expect him to stop? This is what has worked for him. And the old lesson, which is, which philosophers have figured out for thousands of years, he didn't get it. He didn't get the message. He didn't pay much attention as a student. You can kind of see that. So the old comment, you can't keep using the same method. You can't reason, it got me here. Because what got you here may be what destroys the here you got to. You have to always do the difficult job of assessing an ever-changing. He's not doing it. He's doing more. Kamala Harris did more of what Joe Biden did, and that's why she lost. It's a terrible, dangerous mistake, but no one has clued him in, so we're going to have these surprising moments like we had the other evening with Mr. Netanyahu sitting there and saying that Mr. Trump is the best friend Israel ever had, without understanding what his saying that will cost both him and Mr. Trump. Here it is from the horse's mouth, what every critic of Israel and America in the Arab or Muslim worlds have been saying for a long time. And he just said, yep, that's what we got, without a demurring word from Mr. Trump, who didn't have the presence of mind to realize, whoopie-doodle, we have to walk that one back. Now, he may still do that. I noticed that there's begun to be a walking back of the takeover of Gaza. That's already started. Some of his assistants are muddying that water because they're aware at least of some of the counteracting ideas and forces. But this is spectacle politics. We did see it when he was president before. We were lulled into a false notion that Mr. Biden could take us back to the previous, changing of the guard from Tweedledum to Tweedledee, a Republican and a Democrat, and then another one, and it was all the comfortable same. No, it isn't now. The empire is falling apart. Neither party can say so. Neither party can dare admit it. So neither party can come up with a plan or a program for how to handle this problem, because they're all in the what problem mentality. And so what do they have to do? They have to come up with ersatz, substitutes. They have to be seen to be busily dealing with the urgent problems of our time, because they're not. It's exactly the same as listening to Mr. Trump and his supporters talk about his mandate. He won the popular vote by 1.5%. That's not a mandate. That never was a mandate. Whatever the opposite of mandate is, that's what it is. So he has to say it over and over again. So he has to say, I'm taking Greenland. I'm not going to let trans people play on women's sports. He has to go after those issues because everybody knows there's bad things happening. Everybody in America knows, but they don't know exactly what it is or where to look for it. So the president, if he's going to appeal to people as a solution, in some sense, of the malaise they all feel, he's got to come up with a worked out theater. These are the problems, and I think that, we have a problem with our economy. I'm going to hit people with tariffs. What is that? How that works, why we should expect that to work, nobody asks. A few economists point out that it might not work. Why? Because there's a 300-year literature on tariffs, because they're an old tool that have been used in many parts of the world in many different circumstances. So any decent library has millions of books and articles about tariffs. If you know any of that, then the blubble bubble that comes out of the Trump administration is pathetic in its naivete, in its simple-mindedness. But that's not why. That's a mistake. That doesn't matter. He's slapping them with tariffs, and he's slapping them, and he's getting more territory, and he's preventing those trans people from playing soccer with women. I mean, this is a performance substitute. And what it means, and I know Michael and I have talked about this, what it means, it can work politically for a while. It certainly has done that for Mr. Trump. But meanwhile, the underlying problems are getting worse. They're not being addressed. They're not being debated. There are no plans being formulated. What do you do for a declining empire? What have other empires done in their declines? What are the dangers? By the way, all of that is known. All of that could be a debate we'd have, but not in the United States. The United States is practicing 100% denial. It's too frightened of the very prospect of what we're talking about to be able to diminish it. And so it's going to get worse. I want to remind you, the International Monetary Fund has announced the results. The U.S. GDP grew in 2024 by about 2.7, 2.8%. And the GDP of the People's Republic of China grew at 5%. You've got to deal with this because you didn't in 2024. You have been unable to stop the Chinese from that kind of a performance. So what are you going to do? Nothing. You ask the question and everybody looks at you, as if you just asked how heavy the number 4 is or what color is Thursday. In other words, you're asking questions, the categories of which make no sense because people don't want to see it. Since you never were told that the days of the week have a color or that the numbers from 1 to 10 have weight, you could have been told that. If you were taught that, you would have known the answer, but you were never taught. So that the question makes no sense. So Michael and I and you, Nima, we are discussing things which for a large group of people make no sense. They look at and they must respond to us as, what are they talking about? When Michael before said in passing and with humor, we have a president who doesn't know what he's doing. That's literally the situation, and it's not limited to the president, obviously. He intuitively feels the theatric that will work in the moment, and he's been right about that.
Well, Richard's covered a huge territory, so all I can do is comment on some of the words that he's used. Richard, you talked about a mandate. Think of George W. Bush, who had a much tinier fraction of a percent mandate basically given to him by the Supreme Court. When he was criticized for that, he said, elections have consequences. And in America, no matter how little you win, any taking power is a mandate, or at least the party that is taking office treats it as if it's a mandate. That's how the antagonism between the Republicans and the Democrats for who is going to best represent the Wall Street and the financial elite are going to win. They're bidding for the same audience. Basically, it's like you have two TV shows on NBC and ABC looking for the audience support. And you also mentioned performance, and that's exactly what we're seeing. Trump is made his great political breakthrough as a performer, a TV performer. Hiring and firing people and making decisions about building. That's how he got elected. But I think there's something more. There's a method to his madness as a performer, and that's a bluff. He wants to get a concession for something. So if you're looking at his threats for tariffs that you mentioned against, say, Colombia, Canada, Mexico, and China, what does he really want? His bluffs are all based on a certain common denominator. His bluff is, we will create chaos for you, and we're operating in our self-interest to do this, and it'll create chaos for you. He's going to see, what are they going to do about it? Well, what he has in mind all along is something much more. It looks like in Canada, what he wanted, well, give us a concession so we won't wreck your economy. What's the concession? Canada's supposed to spend $1 billion just in policemen along the border to make sure that there are no Albanian or Colombian immigrants or whoever coming over the border. Same thing for Mexico, $1 billion border guards. Can that really be all? Or that's going to certainly give them 1 month respite from all of the tariffs that he's promised. But what does he want more? What does he want in Israel for the Gaza proposals? This is a kind of maneuvering, and he's not sure what he's going to get, and he can't tell what he's going to get until he sees the cries of agony saying, don't do this, please don't do this, you'll hurt us this way. This tells him, okay, this is how to hurt them to get a concession on something else. What concession do I want for this? So I think he has a whole group of advisors, the billionaires around him, who all want various concessions, and his way of getting his menu of concessions is to shake things up with his performance bluffs to really shake up things. Nima's question began about, well, what about the AID? For me and for many people on the left, and I assume you too, Richard, the AID was the mighty Wurlitzer. It's the National Endowment for Democracy. It's regime change. Of course, it provides food to some countries through particular non-governmental organizations that double as political organizations with in which CIA intelligence operatives can work, and as recruiters for local politicians. The aid always have a covert operation. And again, the National Endowment for democracy is a part of it. And certainly what you and Nima were saying, well, Trump wants to go after the Democrats because it came out today that a lot of AID money has been to finance the political blog Politico, Democratic Party CIA leak political blog. It's into control of how people think about the journalistic view, the political view. It all is tied into the politics of particular parties, the Democrats or the Republicans. And Trump wants to use AID, I think, in the National Endowment for Democracy and all of the non-governmental organizations that have been getting money as part of America's regime change and interference with other collections to get Republican recipients instead of Democratic recipients of this money. So, of course, you're right. These operations of NED and AID are going to continue, but they'll continue under Republican control and that of its major donors. And I do think that Trump is trying to get rid of the neocons within this. The neocons are basically the Democratic Party's core ever since the Scoop Jackson era. And also, the Zelensky made an interesting statement since we talked last week. He said, well, most of the foreign aid that has gone to Ukraine has been paid to Americans. We never got the aid. And if you're talking about military arms, that's gone to American producers. America, he said, has been sending us all of its worn out and obsolete tanks and arms and used the money to pay for the military industrial complex to replace these in America's stockpile with new, working, not worn out arms. I think he's right there. You could go right down beyond arms to talk about politics. The major newspapers from Ukraine to Europe are financed by AID, often in conjunction with groups like George Soros's NGOs and other NGOs. But it's part of a worldview that is aims at controlling how the narrative by which other people think of how the world operates to make them lead to accept the American point of view and American interest, all very covertly. So I think we're doing this, but it's not only to shape a pro-American view, but since, as we've discussed, it's not really pro-American, it's divided into these different groups that, as you pointed out, Richard, the empire is breaking up and you're having some groups work against the others. And now we have the Silicon Valley, the information technology groups taking over from the military Cold War neocon groups that were in the Democratic Party. So I think the consequences that the seemingly narrow vote that the Republicans have is, well, they got it. It doesn't matter how large the election margin is. What matters is that they're in control, and they're going to use the control in the same way George W. Bush did, with a total mandate to reverse everything that's happening before and take it, replace the class war with a political party war that is leading the class war for its own particular interest, because within the financial, the billionaires class, we've seen a shift in who is the billionaire class, who is the ruling class. We've seen a shift in this, and also in the politics of all of this, and in the culture. So all of this is being sort of all wrapped together, and you can see how AID was a part of this under the Democrats' control. Bringing it into the State Department enables Trump to control foreign aid and regime change and propaganda, and especially the subsidy of the international press and the mighty Wurlitzer under his control and Republican Party control, not the neocon Democratic Party control with its its ideology. So I think, now that we've gone beyond national self-interest for this sort of micro, specifically American phenomenon, we're onto something.
Yeah, I think so. I think that I would hold on to what I said, that the fundamental behavior of most American governmental institutions will not change in many, many dimensions, whether you have Republicans or Democrats, because there's not enough difference between them on those basics. But what we will see, and I think that's why you're right, Michael, to push us a little bit in that, disaggregated analysis direction, is that, here's some examples. The United States, in its foreign aid, will not be as anti-abortion as it now will be. Mr. Trump will replace those people he finds were doing whatever it is his bases anti-abortion people point out. We're angry at this project in Greece, and we don't, and that'll then be shut down or be changed in what it does. Not necessarily to something that you and I, the three of us, would think is superior, but something which addresses that kind of concern. If Michael is right, and I think he is, that Trump has decided that the neocon approach is something he, for whatever reason, doesn't want to see continue as a dominant theme, then he'll purge out all of those people and substitute people who are not neocons. And then we will watch to see whether, for example, the neocon denigration of the Europeans as allies will be followed by a non-neocon policy, which I can't tell you now. It might be more dismissive of the Europeans, or it could be less. It will have to do with what the ultimate forces are that confront. If a dying empire wants to cannibalize its allies to get through the decline better, then that's going to be what the Democrats do. It's going to be what the Republicans do, with some differences, but they'll all be eating the lunch of their allies to give them a bit more time on this earth. They'll sacrifice them. Who cares about Denmark? Right? That can morph into who cares about France or Germany too. And you could see the United States. It's an extension, if I may, of what we know from declining empires. When the empire declines, when the economic system, whether it has an empire or not, declines, those at the top, those with the power and the wealth, use their power and wealth to minimize the effect on themselves of the declining environment. So they offload the burden onto the middle and lower classes. That's why we don't raise the minimum wage here. That's why the Republicans are going to cut all kinds, or try to cut all kinds of social spending. That's why the Europeans are desperate in that situation. If the Europeans do what the Americans are demanding, raise their defense expenditures, how are they going to pay for that? Answer, they're going to cut their social spending. And they're going to get a lot of support from a Republican mentality in the United States for doing that. We're going to see the difference in the same basic policy, because Republicans who want to do it this way, we have Democrats who think rather let's do it that way. That's the debate. But what they're both doing is the same thing. They have different ways of doing it. That's as true in foreign policy as it is true here domestically. That's why neither party questions anything about the underlying capitalist system. That's why they have to deny that there is such a thing as an empire, let alone that it's declining.
I think you're right. Europe is going to be the great indicator of exactly what's unfolding. And you're going to see, as you pointed out, and we both discussed last time, the class war is going to intensify between the nationalist right and the economy at large. The Democrats have been supporting the Social Democrats and the Labor parties on the far right of the political spectrum, and the nationalists that we can no longer call the far right, the nationalists who want to avoid war in Ukraine and make peace with Russia are at the opposite side of the Social Democrats are the war party, basically. The Labor parties are the war party. The nationalists you can look at as the anti-war party because Europe can't afford it and it's going to impoverish the economy. Not that they care about the economy, but they care about the very top of the economy that needs the bottom of the economy to enrich themselves. So the result is going to be you already have Musk supporting the Alternative for Deutschland party and supporting the separatist, the the Brexiters. So in Britain, as opposed to the Democrats that are supporting at the far right of the political spectrum, the Labour Party under Starmer, and the Christian Democrats under Schultz, and especially the Green Party on the ultra-right nationalist part of the spectrum. So all of this is going to change the political wrapping, the superficial narrative of the class war, but there is going to be, if anything, even more of a class war now, in the sense of removing the few social protections that the social democratic parties in Europe had to try to maintain voter support. Obviously, this is going to take away voter support, but the one thing that AID has done that I think Donald Trump looks at as its great contribution to political technology is occurred in Romania and Georgia. If the people vote an alternative to you, you just say, we've canceled the elections. We don't recognize them. If you don't vote for the American candidate, which means in the past, the Democratic Party candidate, the candidate supported by the Democrats, we're not going to recognize it. I think now you're going to have the same support of the nationalist parties throughout Europe. And this is going to change some degree of geopolitics because the nationalist parties such as Hungary, Slovakia, the Czechs are are being squeezed by the cutoff of gas and oil trade with Russia now. So I think that you're going to see the geopolitics of this changing alliances of the class war towards the nationalists affect the geopolitical relationships with Russia, trade in order to protect economies that support the Republican right-wing antisocial protection aspects of the class war. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's consistent with what I see. The only thing I can add is that it strikes me that the Democrats made a decision decades ago that if they moderated their political stance, if they moved to the right, they could get a significant number of billionaires, maybe in the high tech Silicon Valley situation to give them a lot of money, to take money they had given the Republicans, the way most employers had done for a century, but the Democrats could get it. All they needed to do was be centrist, celebrate wealth accumulation, all of the things that you can see in Nancy Pelosi or any of those other people. And the Republicans, stung by the success of the Democrats, already pocketing employers' money, did an interesting response. They became, at least in some of their narratives, concerned with those issues that the Democratic Party forewent. Suddenly, it's not it's Trump who's banging the gavel, factories should not move to Mexico. He's protecting American industry, tariffs to protect the auto workers by holding back the better products that the Chinese are able to produce. That's stealing the Democrat. They're normally the working class representatives. And so the Republicans, and look how the elections, suddenly Michigan, Pennsylvania, used to be solid working class Democratic states, are now not so clear. Mr. Trump is more of a rhetorical. So the Democrats got some more big donors, and the Republicans took away some of the base that the Democrats had counted on. And they took away enough that the extra donors, Kamala Harris spent more than Mr. Trump. The extra donors weren't enough because removing the base, muddying the class war dimensions that are always lurking there, cost the Democrats very dearly. And I think, again, you're watching the shifting battle between the two big parties when they are forced to deal with a declining economy and a declining empire, but precluded by their own ideological blindness from seeing it, facing it, strategizing around it. And so we sit here with performance leaders while the situation dissolves below us. I think that's where we are. And we're watching the performance of a performance artist, and he's going to give us something once or twice a week to get all revved up about. Meanwhile, nothing changes fundamentally except the slow replacement of the Democrats by Republicans when they're in office, as they now will be for the next 4 years.
I think we're going to see performance on both sides. And I think the litmus test is going to be next week when it comes to the congressional vote or the vote on Tulsi Gabbard. And I think it's going to be the same vote along party lines that it was along RFK Jr. And when you have people of the supposed left, the pretense left of the squad, when you're going to have Bernie Sanders and AOC vote against Tulsi Gabbard in support of the CIA disinformation that Trump has been getting, in support of the national security people, in support of all of the worst right-wing destructive forces in America, I think that's going to show the purely opportunistic, gang-like political aspect of American foreign policy based on this pinnacle of domestic political campaigning for office and all of the emoluments and the money chants and the support, the ability to use government-funded organizations to put in place your own political supporters. I think all of this is going to become nakedly visible in the next week.
I wish I agreed. I'm a little worried, Michael and Nima, that I must say I'm impressed by the mainstream media's complicity, whether they're conscious of it or not, their complicity with the Trump, even those that clearly hate Trump. But it struck me after the wild craziness of the Panama Canal that this unabashed colonial grab, I'm big and powerful, I'm gonna tell a small country that the single most important asset that country has, the canal, and being able to run it and charge for use of it, I'm gonna take away from them. And the discussion, what are the precedents for this? How would he go about what? The commitment of the United States, itself an ex-colony, is about to colonize what? The most fundamental questions that should have been asked, no. It became a technology. It's like what happened to Michael and my profession. Instead of asking questions like Adam Smith, what makes some nations rich and other nations poor? We ask technical questions. How much of a lag is there between an act of monetary policy and its effect on the economy? We never question the system. Business school curriculum always assume a capitalist and a worker. It's as if slavery never existed. Feudalism never existed. Worker co-ops never. The narrowness is mind-bending. That's what I see. And that has to break. Something has to happen. And we're running out of time. It's a nice way to end. Programs like this, and here my hat is off mostly to you, Nima, making these programs happening, letting Michael and me and all the others who think similarly critically about what's going on, giving them an airing, giving them a platform, giving them a chance to compete with the mass media could not be more vital than it is now.
My pleasure to have you both on. Thank you so much,
All right.
Richard and Michael, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always. And see you next
year.
week.
And I look forward to continuing this probably never-ending conversation.
Yeah. See you. Bye-bye.